Hello and welcome to Vikings Territory Breakdown Podcast. I'm Joe Oberle, senior writer at VikingsTerritory.com and PurplePTSD.com, and that's Mark Craig. He's the NFL insider, Vikings writer, and Hall of Fame selector for the Star Tribune and StarTribune.com. Mark, some big news this week. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Kwesi, we hardly knew you. 4 years in and several failed drafts and a contract extension, and he was shown the door. And many were puzzled by the timing, but we here at Vikings Territory Breakdown were not. We've been talking about it since late November after the Vikings were beat by the Packers 23-6. And then you laid out Kwesi's draft record in the paper after backup quarterback Brosmer got beat in Seattle. So showing how there's so little depth. So there's no surprise here. We kind of saw this coming, but I'm just curious to have your thoughts, Mark.
Well, yeah, I mean, Kwesi's seat was flaming. It wasn't on fire. It was in it was an inferno. But so I don't think anyone's really surprised that he's gone. It was the timing. But I think I did a story on the Wilf family. It's a fun story. We talked to their mom, a Holocaust survivor, and in the process of doing that, you learn that Mark Wilf is a very, very meticulous guy, and they're structured. Their process was to do this after the season, and they went through their due diligence and arrived at it at this time. I think that a lot of teams would have done it. You're out of the playoffs in mid-December. You speed that process up so you could maybe have a GM that you could hire when you're supposed to hire the GM. So that the timing is, I would relate it to that. There's no, Mark Wilf didn't say that, but that's just my feeling is that they are very meticulous people, and they check a box and they move on, and they're not rushed by the outside world. So not a surprise. The timing is a surprise. I do feel like rather than have Kwesi go through another draft, it's good to have Rob in charge and working with people. It was just a bad fit. Being an old guy, like a football guy, I never liked the hire. I never liked the analytics hire. I never liked the fact that he hadn't been a GM. I didn't find the, him coming in and basically acting like, geez, I didn't realize this, or I look at things like this. I didn't find it refreshing. I found it alarming, frankly. I think that he's a guy that you want in your organization. You don't want him at the top of the food chain, though. It's just so it's good. He won't. He said we hardly knew him, but he won't be forgotten. There's a couple infamous things that will live on for quite a while.
Speaking to the point you just made about analytics versus, Jeremy Fowler, one of our former colleagues, he's with ESPN now, said his sources told him that as an analytics guy, rather than a scouting guy, he was never truly accepted from day one. Does that track with you at all?
Yes, 100%. I mean, I think that tracks with Brian Flores, which I think Kevin Seifert, he had a source tell him that that played into the role of one of the roles, one of the keys. It was Flores not re-signing. I mean, you try to picture Brian Flores in a room with Kwesi. If I don't know how, if there's any pushback from Kwesi to Brian Flores on a player, it's like where's it coming from here? He was not some of these, there's two different paths, and one is a guy who's a grinder, who's starts out as a scout, works his way up, like the Scott Studwells of the world, and Spielman, people like that, who essentially earn their stripes. And then you have a guy that comes in and he's an analytics guy. Analytics has their place, but he was not a leader of a department. He just wasn't. And there's stories that couldn't really tell right now, but the whole thing of the he's not the grinder. He worked different hours, especially after he had a child. It just didn't mesh with the way the NFL is, and some of that stuff can fly in the real world where you have to be, where before you'd say, hey, pull up your bootstraps and get in here and do this. You can't do that. But in football, there's still an element of football. It's like the grinder, the guy that's always there, the guy that's doors open and we're hashing things out and we're always working. That's who that position is, and he wasn't that.
It's funny that you say that. I mean, it's like in the NFL, those are the stories we hear. That's almost commonplace. It's to be, some guy's coach sleeping in his office or spending all these hours away. So that's almost the norm in the NFL as opposed to otherwise.
Right. And the thing is, it's good to have a guy that builds consensus and he's got his numbers and everything. But it is kind of alarming when you do hear him tell stories about, like he's honest, I guess to a fault, of, O'Connell telling him how important a tight end is and stuff like that. It's like, it just didn't, some might've saw it as refreshing and like, this is a different approach. I just thought it was alarming to hear him speak. And that's sort of, we have all had there's dead horses in his path that we've all kicked him and kicking since, that first draft, and that's not a hindsight thing. That me and everyone else was all over that. You say, what in the world did they do? They didn't get enough back in return. They passed on these players, and then these players became great players. Mm-hmm. He just was never able to live that down, and unfortunately, his draft misses just kept consistently happening. And then you ask your owners to pay $348 million to plug a bunch of holes that shouldn't need to be plugged. Defensive line, cornerback, different positions like that. You look at what they did at corner in their first 2 years. One's a second round pick in the first year. Then the next year there's first year I was a second or fourth round. Second year's the third round. Those guys aren't on your team, so you're having to go out and scramble and do this and that. The numbers that I had with the Packers and the Lions, at that point when I asked that question, it was, the Vikings had 2 guys left from that 3 to 5 year window, 4 guys, and 2 were starters. The Packers had 18 and 12. The Lions had 13 and 11. 11 of those were first team all pros. So, they're losing ground. It's going to take a while to recover from this. And, he just could not be anywhere near another draft.
You wrote a piece after the news came out and amplifying KOC's comments that there might not have been enough depth on the team. Go ahead, talk about that.
Well, yeah, it was just his, at the time, he said, I guess you're always, being doing this as long as I have, you're sort of surprised when they tell the truth or whenever they, tap dance and their tap dance is actually telling a truth. It was like, he said, it's simple. It's, it's depth. It's, whenever you have to is the next man up truly your next man up that's been in your organization for years, or is he next man up because you just had to go out and get him, and that's what they were repeatedly having to do. Center, a huge mistake this year was Ryan Kelly, and, we can say, okay, Kevin, when it comes to like assembling talent, it's good to have a guy that, builds consensus and he will, accept the fact that he doesn't know as much as KO on offense. And he doesn't know as much as Flores on defense. So Flores can go out and like say, hey, we need to get Van Ginkel. We need to get Grenard. And O'Connell will say, he makes the JJ decision. But where you come along, they can't be full-time GM, full-time scouts. They have a job to do themselves. So whenever Kwesi is like, working the other stuff, like, I don't think that O'Connell was beating the drum on, he might've been beating the drum on JJ given where they were in the draft, but I don't think he was beating the drum on Sam Howell. Like, the answer would be Sam Howell as your backup. I don't think that O'Connell was like, what? I got a job to do over here. I can't go out and get a quarterback too. And there's also stories, obviously, and I believe them. It's of him kind of not being able to, like he didn't do the best job when it came to like the Daniel Jones, like, getting Daniel Jones here, not only I guess with the offer, but like trying to work that deal. And there's just, I can see it. It just was a bad fit. It's like, I can see Kwesi going, who knows, maybe he goes back to, I don't know if anything's happened here in the last week, but go back to Cleveland and work, somewhere in the building, he's crunching, he's doing some things, but he's just not he's not a leader of a football operations. He's just not.
There have been, since the firing came down, there's been some rumors / reporting of infighting between perhaps Brian Flores and Kwesi, or some of the other, even as you intimated with KOC. Does that track with what you've found out?
Well, yeah, I've always, long ago I sat down when Bill Belichick was the coach at the Browns, and his GM, I don't know, he didn't have the title GM, but Mike Lombardi was his GM guy. And I remember just asking something, I was doing a story on something, and I said, something about like what happens whenever you guys disagree, or, and they kind of laughed and said, oh, what do you mean disagree? We're on the same page all the time. And they kind of, shared with me, it's just like any other job. It's like there's going to be, that's like when Pettin came out and did a interview in Cleveland and didn't see eye to eye with Flores. And, people are alarmed when they hear that especially emotional football people, have like, friction, or they're arguing their points. It's just like any other profession. In fact, we probably in our jobs or for you being the retired, mogul that you are, you former jobs, there's infighting all over the place. And yeah, I don't see Flores and Kwesi meshing at all in meetings at all. Two totally different personalities, football, analytics. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all.
Because of their personality, or because of their background, or what? Because we never really, they seem to publicly have a united front when they made these. Because we all thought KOC wanted JJ McCarthy, but there's some insinuations that was more Kwesi's guy. So I mean,
no, that I don't believe. That you don't. They do not bring the starter. Sam Howell I could see as hey, we got to give this a try or whatever. Mm-hmm. But at the 10th pick in the draft overall, there's no way that guy got onto the team without Kevin O'Connell. I mean, the ownership would not permit that. Kwesi, I think, would be smart enough not to override that. Now, there's been stories out there which I do not believe that. Oh yeah, they if they would have had someone else, they could have gotten Drake May in that trade with New England. Are you kidding me? When you get the 3rd pick in the draft, you do it to get a Drake May, not give him away to someone else. I mean, they where they were in the draft and those quarterbacks being there. If you want to argue that they should have taken Bo Nix and they blew it on that, then you go all day long. But you cannot argue that they could have gotten Caleb Evans if they'd have traded, or they could have got Drake May. They were not in a position. They were too far outside the circle, and those teams don't. I mean, all we got to do is look at what's going to happen on Sunday when you identify that quarterback. If Bill Belichick had lasted another 2 years, he'd be back in the Super Bowl trying to win a 7th one, because they got the quarterback.
Probably still wouldn't be enough for the Hall of Fame first ballot, but we'll talk about that later. Michael Rand, in your paper I just read this morning before we came on, he was saying he had this statement that now we're going to see what Kevin O'Connell really thinks of JJ McCarthy, implying that Kwesi had more to do with it than KOC. I mean, any thoughts there? I mean, now whatever Kwesi had influence on that, it's KOC's job, it's KOC's quarterback, and it's his situation. So
yeah, I mean, I guess with due respect to Mike, it was Kwesi. It's Kevin's guy whether Kwesi's here or not.
Okay.
I mean, it's you can't sit here and there's just no one can make that argument that Kevin O'Connell got forced into taking J.J. McCarthy. There's no way. And but what you're going to see is that if we're sitting here a year from now and they don't make the playoffs, then KO is not. He won Coach of the Year. Kevin Stefanski won 2 of them, and he got thrown out the door. So you do have to win, and it's not going to be Kevin O'Connell forever. But if this we all, or at least I did, and a lot of people thought, obviously Kwesi, something happens, Kwesi's out the door first. But when he's out the door now, it's the clock's ticking on Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah,
no question.
So Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's legacy then, a lot of missed draft picks, misguided draft day trades in his division, which you enumerated earlier that they lost out on. He did some good free agency work, but there were so many holes left filled that he missed on draft day that he had to scramble to do that. And I contend you have to, in that job, you have to be able to project how a player is going to be. And now I know it's not an exact science, but what he did more work at, it seemed like, was undrafted free agents and free agents, which is, with the free agents, you already know what they can do. Well, he went out and got a whole bunch of them last year, and a lot of them who with injury history got injured again. It's not a great legacy when we're going to look back.
No. I mean, when you're rolling the clips, if they ever do a documentary like before a game, say before a preseason game, they put him up on the big board. It'll be him trading down with the Lions, and that's the infamy, and that's the first big move was that move is trading down 20 spots, not really getting a whole lot back, picking the wrong guy. Giving Detroit a really good player, giving needing safety and having the safety go to Baltimore, all pro corner going to their corner starved forever. All pro corner going to Kansas City, who's a perennial Super Bowl team. They're getting all pros down at the bottom of the draft, and while this guy's dropping all the way to the bottom and taking Lewis Seen, who wasn't good enough to make the team or to make the starting lineup coming out of a training camp, and here we are. Harrison Smith finally, he can't play till he's 50, and this is should be Lewis Seen's defense. That one all the way up until you could just say each draft has had its own problems. They draft a rookie in the 3rd round, Ty Felton. They don't trust Ty Felton to play 3 games in place of Jordan Addison, who gets suspended at the beginning of this year. And because he can't play those 3 games, they go out to Carolina, who robs them completely, pickpockets Kwesi of essentially as a 4th round draft pick for a washed up Adam Thielen, who was never able to contribute in those 3 games, let alone the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. I mean, a 4th round draft pick for Adam Thielen at age 35, and he caught I don't know how many balls. I mean, those are the kind of moves.
8 to 9 games. Yeah. 8 and 9 games.
It's just, those are the kind of moves you don't, and it's unfortunate the clock starts on KO, because it's, you don't snap your fingers and recover from the fact that your team was starting to absolutely, there should have been tumbleweeds going through the locker room when it came to young 20-something core talent players. Now some of the things that he and with the help of his coaching staff were able to latch on to were, getting Jalen Redmond out of the UFL. That's a great move. Ivan Pace was good, and then Eric Wilson coming in and step it. But those are not, hats off to these are guys with incredible drive.
And Grenard and Cashman was
right. But then this year, Ryan Kelly is a massive mistake.
Yeah.
Will Fries, although he played every game, which is nice on that offensive line, he did not live up to the money that they paid him. And then Hargrave and
Jonathan Allen.
And Jonathan Allen, I took the cheese on a lot of these guys. You play the tape, and I was probably saying these are generational pass rushers and everything, losing sight of the fact that, and I can't believe I lose sight of the fact, because I'm always telling people, don't go for the name. If that name is now 30 some years old, and they weren't great fits. So one or both could be cap casualties as Rob Brzezinski tries to figure out, how do you get rid of, that they're over the cap by 40 million or whatever it is. It's kind of a mess. And KO, I'm sure he'll get more than a year to figure this out, but
right.
He better make the playoffs just to eliminate the possibility of being shown the door himself.
Okay, well, we should take a quick break right about now and come back, and we're looking back here at Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, who's gone as the GM from the Vikings after 4 seasons, and we need to look forward and see what's happening next. I mean, you mentioned Rob Brzezinski. I want to come back and have you talk about him, since he's going to be running this draft and what experience is there. So come on back to Vikings Territory Breakdown, and we'll chat about it. All right, folks, welcome back to Vikings Territory Breakdown with Mark Craig from the Star Tribune. Mark, we're talking about the exit of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah as the GM of the Vikings, and what's been reported, they don't have another GM in yet, and they're not just going to, snap, bang, and hire one tomorrow. So cap guru Rob Brzezinski is going to run the draft. Tell me what you know about him, and what are you comfortable with that? Is that a fine thing, or what? I know he's a good guy, and he's a cap genius, but it's a little surprising that all of a sudden he's going to run the draft. But go ahead.
Yeah, we will say, let's put one last bow on Kwesi. I wanted to say that the irony of maybe one of the worst GMs in franchise history, his crowning moment is drafting one of the best kickers in franchise, in a tortured history of kickers in this franchise. He brought you Will Reichert, an all-pro guy at 24 years of age. So I guess we will have to put that in his little film. Rob is I'm comfortable with Rob running the draft, because while Spielman didn't always have the best drafts, Spielman had a system that Rob was essential in. And Spielman, say what you want about his picks and everything, but Spielman was a leader of a department. Spielman was a guy that was respected by all those people. Rob was as much his right hand man as anybody. And, they had a system on draft day when, working the phone. He, George Payton, and Rob were the 3 guys that really worked the draft, when it came to, calling for trades, accepting calls for trades. Now, everyone has their system, I understand. But Rob's also a guy that I feel comfortable with in free agency, being the guy that can get on the phone and have the respect of a 20, he's been here 25, 26 years. And before here, he was in Miami. So he's a long-time NFL guy with the relationships that I feel like, let's put it this way. If you're looking for an ad, if you say you need a receiver and Rob Brzezinski was on the phone, I don't think that in running the show, I don't think that Carolina is able to steal a 4th round pick from Rob that they stole from Kwesi. And I have to believe that whenever they got that deal done, they were like, what? Some of the other people were probably, Carolina saw Kwesi coming, as far as I'm concerned.
He really didn't value draft capital as much as maybe other GMs. Wouldn't you say that?
Well, I don't know.
Because he gave
when we regurgitated the Jimmy Johnson, granted, the Jimmy Johnson chart is 30 years old now, or at least 30 years old. And then that was spit back to him back when they made that trade with Detroit. It was just such a condescending, that's yesterday. That no longer applies. I wouldn't say he didn't value draft picks. I just feel that because he did to get the left tackle that they got mid-season last year. Drawing a blank on his name, Cam Robinson. for a low round pick. I thought that was good scrambling. When they got the Pastronaut, the quarterback, it worked for 2 games. Relatively low resources involved in that. So it's not everything wasn't bad. Like Mark Wilf said, it's not just one move. And I said my feeling was it was closer to every other move than it was only one move. But he did do some good things. But I feel that Rob is a good guy. I don't know that when we were at talking to interviewing Mark Wilf, and he didn't rule out the fact that Rob could be the guy. Going forward, I think that. And if I'm Rob, because Rob survived everything,
right?
If I'm Rob and I don't want to move, and making the bad deals work, you can keep your job. Making them work financially, you keep your job. If you make the move that's bad, then you lose your job. So Rob has been a survivor through everything. He goes back to 1999. I mean, he's been here through everything. So he's a really good. If you're going to do this. First of all, you shouldn't do this when they did it this late. But if you do it, then Rob's a good guy to get you to the other side of this.
Well, that raises an interesting point and a question in my mind is that this thing was this process for evaluating Kwesi was happening. Who knows when it started? How much of this was known and affects what you talked about, who they're going to bring in next potentially, and Rob Brzezinski if that happens. B, retaining Brian Flores. I'm sure he has had frustrations with some of what Kwesi has done, and maybe if they're saying, well, he's kind of on the way out here, hang around, or I don't know. Is that? Do you think is that a possibility that this was all shared and they're all saying, hey, don't everybody jump off the ship just yet?
I think the timing with Flores probably was more to do with the fact that when he didn't get the Steelers job, which is the best job in football, then he wasn't going to go be a defensive coordinator in Washington or something like that. But him not signing the contract when guys typically do, you could say that might have had something to do with, hey, I just don't know if I want to be, be around when, and I don't know, there could be some guys that, Flores got a lot of guys, and we talk about the guys that he got and that he wanted, but there could be guys, there's probably guys he got that he didn't, or they wanted that he didn't get. So, and he didn't, there was not a trust of, this guy knows what he's talking about. And so, or that Kwesi knew what he was talking about. So I could see that, but the next guy coming in, it's still it's a good job. This is ownership tries. Ownership will give you the resources. The results aren't there in 20 some years of playoff wins and success, but they are. I would imagine they are good owners to work for because they are patient. They did take a chance on this Kwesi, and I don't think we're going to be seeing another analytics guy. I don't think we're going to be seeing another inexperienced backup from Cleveland coming in to build the team. So, who knew that an inexperienced backup from Cleveland couldn't build you a football team?
You did. When I started looking at this the whole weekend, and just you try figuring it out, and things come and go in your brain. But George Patton or
Payton? Yeah, George Payton.
Not Payton. The defensive guy that came from the Packers that got going.
Oh, Patton, Mike Patton.
Patton, mid-season. There was some infighting there between him and Flores because they're both defensive guys. Is this starting to look like it was pretty dysfunctional administration going on over there? With some people not agreeing with Kwesi, Flores not getting along with Patton, KOC being, maybe as you speculated, surprised at some of these moves. It sounds like all of a sudden there's a lot of dysfunction over there.
Well, when you lose, there's the dysfunction tends to bubble to the top, and Mike Patton. And the thing is, and it started with Flores when Tua came out and was talking about, he was a bad guy to play
Yeah.
for and all this, and then he got. To me, it's like, there's a level of old school to Brian Flores, and Brian Flores is very successful. So to me, if there's a disagreement between Mike Pettin and Brian Flores, I'm sorry, Mike, but if you had to step away, so what? So what? If you were worthy of being a defensive coordinator, you'd be the defensive coordinator, not Brian Flores.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a problem with Flores. And you could, the defensive line coach that left midseason 2 years ago or whatever it was, there was problems with, Flores. That was back whenever, they go to Philadelphia and they're running the ball so many consecutive plays that Al Michaels is going, that's 7 runs in a row. That's 8 runs in a row. That's 10. It got up to like 15, I think, runs in a row. And the Vikings, granted, they were, they didn't have the defensive lineman to put in there. And so, there's problems, there's discussions between your defensive line coach and your coordinator. And so, this is not, they don't just all walk in whistling and holding hands and nothing ever, no heads are ever butted.
Yeah. Well, all this, you intimated in our last segment that, the clock starts ticking on Kevin O'Connell. They don't have a GM yet. So what, say it's not Rob Brzezinski. He's going to get a sure trial run at it here in the next couple months, but what kind of GM are they going to hire? I mean, your coach is already there. GMs often come in wanting to have their own coach, and so do the Vikings the Wolves who clearly like Kevin O'Connell, do they hire someone, a rubber stamp for him, or did they say, hey, he's our coach, when they hire this guy that you can't hire? I mean, what does this look like next for the Vikings? It's plugging something into a spot without, you don't have an open field to go ahead.
Right. And, it's a good question because, while there'll be parameters, there won't be I don't think there'll be long-term parameters. Mm-hmm. The GM, when he gets hired, is not going to, it's not going to be one of those where we're hiring you as a GM and then he comes in and a week later it's, he hires another coach,
Right.
Kevin O'Connell, the timing of this is very strange because, you're bringing in a guy and I don't, to me, I would, obviously you're looking for maybe some of the guy, I think Peyton's contract is up in Denver. And I've heard him mentioned as a possibility. I haven't seen the other possibilities, but, he was a guy that stayed here forever. Passed up a lot of jobs, was getting interviewed every year for places. People liked the structure that the Vikings had, and they didn't have the postseason success, but Peyton was considered a hot candidate for a long time. He finally took the Denver job. Wonder if he could be coming back, working with Rob. They're very close friends. That's a possibility. Then you look at, who are the second in charge in the, the Pittsburghs and the Baltimores and just some of the sturdier franchises, I guess. But it won't
be away from the AFC North, Mark. We're staying away from the AFC North. Come on.
So, it's going to be strange. It's going to be interesting to see who they bring in. It's, the Wilfs say that they like the traditional, the GM is the decision maker with heavy input from the coaches and, and trying to build consensus. Now that's not a guy that's coming in my way or the highway, but it's also not a rubber stamp. I also feel like it wouldn't hurt to have an experienced guy that can push back on KO and have the credibility to do so. Like if you had a more experienced veteran football guy and Kevin O'Connell wants something, and that guy could push back a little and say, no, We got to do this and make and talk on the same level as Kevin O'Connell. Kwesi couldn't do that because he was not a scout. He was not a, he just looked at football as football players as numbers. And there's been answers that he's had over the years. A few times that he did speak was the, just relating to that. Like, he's almost like a kid coming alive, his eyes opening to the fact that these are human beings, and he had to learn how to realize that they were human beings, and as opposed to just numbers in a computer.
Interesting. Well, my hierarchy is move KO up to GM/head coach, make Brian Flores co-head coach, and let Rob Brzezinski, do his magic there, and then you're set to go. And then, I like Kevin O'Connell and
I think the days. I mean, you can have the like Belichick. You can have de facto GMs that are that the head coach kind of controls. But the days of the head coach being the same GM head coach, I think the business is too big, too complicated, too year round, too 24/7 for a guy to be GM, and because the GM also has to be the guy that go in, and this is another reason why it wouldn't work. The GM has to be the one that tells whenever say one of your best players decides, I want $1 bazillion, and it's not the head coach the head coach can go to the player and go, yeah, you really deserve $1 bazillion. I hope you get it. Whereas the then the head coach goes over to the GM and goes, we can't give him $1 bazillion because we got to get these other players. When you're the GM, you got to be the one to tell that player. And today's players don't like to be told anything.
We need a good cop, bad cop, and it can't be the same guy. So
cannot be the same guy.
I just threw that out so Mark could dump on that idea, and he did. And the Vikings actually did it kind of already. They hired this week a Miami Dolphins offensive coordinator Frank Smith as assistant head coach, replacing Mike Pettin, who retired earlier this month. Then they got offensive line assistant coach Kevin Carter was also promoted to lead his position group, and he was replacing Chris Cooper, if that's how you say his name. And then they hired Gerald Alexander Flores, former defensive backs coach in Miami, to place Durante Jones, while Jacksonville defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen will take over as D-line coach and defensive run game coordinator. So they did hire some bodies this week in the wake of this change.
Yeah, I mean, the assistant brought in that had experience with Flores. I like that because you lose a Flores voice in the rooms when Jones goes to Washington as defensive coordinator. So now you have a Flores guy to back in the building to help relay the Flores way. I like that one. That one I think makes a difference. The promoting the offensive line coach, I think I'm hoping to me that for years, not only have they had a problem with talent, a problem with durability, but they've also had there's just a disconnect when teams do stunts and games on them that they don't seem to pick up the way a lot of teams do. So I'm hoping that guy makes a difference just in the coordination of offensive line. It's probably a raw deal for Chris Cooper to get fired after a year like this, when you get fired in a year when you have all these injuries. You have a year where Christian Darrisaw is not only late coming in after when he probably should have started earlier, but then he's taking himself out, and then you have to shut him down. And then O'Neal has injuries, and you're down to your third string center who's never played the position before. But that position, to me, if they can pass along a way to coordinate, that would be great. As far as the offensive assistant or head coach assistant, my guess is it's something to do with running the ball. Unless he's an elite running back or a great center, I don't know how much that helps. The defensive run game coordinator, unless he's an all-pro, unless he's two all-pro defensive tackles in one, it doesn't do much for me.
Okay, well, so they did okay. They're not great.
Well, I don't know.
Well, it's
You got to get the players. You need the players in the positions that where they're weak, and until they do.
The Vikings have got to make hay with this draft this year. We all, I think, in months past when we talked about this, we all thought. I kind of back in my mind said, okay, he better come through in this one or he's gone, Kwesi. But they pulled the plug sooner. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Well, we're going to take a break and we're going to talk about something else that's going on in the NFL. You might have heard about it. I guess there's a game this weekend that has some significance. So come on back and we'll talk about that on Vikings Territory Breakdown. All right, folks, welcome back to Vikings Territory Breakdown. And I just want to put it out there that before it's over, Kevin O'Connell is still the reigning coach of the year. So, we got that going for us going into the offseason, right?
Maybe he won't give it up. Maybe he'll just hold on to it. And Vrabel will have to wrestle him to the ground and rip it from his hands.
Those two guys are former teammates, weren't they?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, something that did make headlines as the season winds down and awards and such are announced. It came out that Bill Belichick, winner of six Super Bowls as head coach and 2 more as an assistant, did not get a first ballot Hall of Fame. Didn't get into the Hall of Fame on his first vote. Why didn't you vote for him, Mark?
No, Mike, don't put that clip out there, Mike. Here's
I'm kidding.
What I've done is try to add context to what could have happened. In my mind, I had him on my 3-person ballot that I had to cast, and there was nothing that was going to knock me off of that. But I understand. There's 49 other people, at least 11 decided to go another route with their 3 people. And I've tried to explain, and all of us have tried to explain why. In the past, before 2024, the subcommittees, I was on the coaches subcommittee. There were 9 guys. We went through the process. We did our due diligence. We gave our presentations. And in the end, it was, are you kidding me? Bill Belichick is the guy. All right. So he's presented to the full committee. In the past, before 2024, it would have been 50 people voting yes or no on Bill Belichick.
Mm-hmm.
While there were some that have Spygate, Deflategate, cheating on their minds, might have voted no, there would not have been 11 of them. Okay. So Bill Belichick in the old system, to me, and to a lot of people, would be in right now. He'd be in the Hall of Fame. What they do is now the system, which we've been telling them, the voters have kind of pushed back on others more than me, is you take 3 senior candidates. It was Roger Craig, L.C. Greenwood, and Ken Anderson. You take those 3, you take Robert Kraft in the contributor category, put him in there, Bill Belichick in the coaches category. We discuss all of them. Bill Belichick was a 46-minute discussion, longer than any of the 20 that we talked about on January 13th. And a lot of it was, obviously, I can't give the details and what was said, but, some of the gates were discussed and the system was discussed as far as, okay, these 3 senior candidates. To become a senior, to reach the senior candidate or finalists, it usually, there's a pool of guys that after 20 years, they get dropped into the senior and they disappear. They may have 1 crack, 2 cracks probably at most of being voted on by the full 50 people committee. Okay. So those 3 guys are sitting there, and what some selectors have said, and some that had voted no against, or not against Belichick, 3 others, what they've said is that, I decided to vote for the players because the players are going to disappear. L.C. Greenwood's been waiting since the 70s, Ken Anderson since the 70s, Roger Craig since the 80s. So if you felt that those 3 guys are Hall of Famers, there's factors other than Bill Belichick being an 8-time Super Bowl and he should be in the Hall of Fame. And you weigh that, okay, those guys will disappear maybe forever. L.C. Greenwood was like a finalist as a modern era player like 6 or 7 times. So he got passed over then. He got passed over as a senior. So they decided, some of these people decided, I'm going to vote for those 3. I can't,
Mhm.
it's like have 5 kids, your 5 kids put in front of you and say, take 3 of them. And you go, you can't take 4 or 5 of them. So, and they do that with the understanding, okay, these guys might disappear. Bill Belichick is going to be put back in the subcommittee, and he's going to be right back there next year. And so while that wasn't my thinking was, none of that mattered, because I'm sorry, I was going to vote. If Bill Belichick is put in front of me and 5 people, he has to be one of my 3.
Yeah.
Now, what I went into that meeting saying, this is it is a screwy system to try and to do it that
I'm
way.
going to ask you that. Yeah.
Because it's not apples to apples. It's not player to player. It's player to owner to coach.
Contributor to contributor.
Yeah, contributor. So I went in thinking, okay, here's my thinking before I hear the discussion. I said Belichick and Kraft, and then I was going to take either LC or Roger Craig. I'm not in the camp of Ken Anderson as a Hall of Fame quarterback. I'm just not. But I feel like Roger Craig and LC Green would have been kind of overlooked. They were an integral part of 2 dynasty teams that didn't get in only because of too many other guys from their teams got in. So whenever I'm listening to it, I said, you know what? I can't vote for an owner over LC or Roger Craig. So I went LC, Roger Craig, and Belichick. That was my ballot. And we weren't told the final. We weren't told the results. Now it's pretty easy to guess how the results came, how it got made public, because one of the reasons that we do it early now is so they can go make the knock on the door and film it for everyone, or the guys who don't get the knock, they got to get a call. And I don't know if that happened in this case, but you sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, where they're not going to tell people. And I think I would be willing to bet that Belichick said, "Are you kidding me?" Right. And it got out, that Belichick isn't in. Now wouldn't it be strange if we get to Thursday and he is in, but I don't think that's the case. So that's how it happened. That's some context. I've seen it from Nate Burleson talking on Good Morning America to every site imaginable, as the ones I could stomach, and I just gave up looking at it. It's that we're the 50 dumbest people and the 50 thinnest skinned people in the world. And I guarantee you, I'm 60 and I'm one of the whippersnappers in that room. I think there isn't one person in there that's going to vote against a guy or not vote for a guy because he was mean to the media or he didn't answer our questions. These are the most grizzled, thick-skinned people you'll ever meet. So we've voted in the past. We've presented people that we didn't like or we hated or hated us.
Well, then it really comes down to is the new system that was instituted a few years back is kind of flawed. I cannot see these guys in the same category as Kraft, as
right.
as the players. It doesn't make sense to me to have to vote that way.
Right.
Because next year, what if there's a couple guys that are going to disappear and that could bump him out again?
Well, it's possible, because, and I can't speak for the Hall of Fame, but they're fluid, and in their defense, they do try to get things right. I mean, I think this was part of a process because we also vote. When we used to go modern era candidates, we used to go 15, 10, 5, up and down on 5. Now we go 15, 10, 7. And we vote for 5 of the 7. That's a little more easier to take, but it also results, just like the other system, in votes getting spread around to where guys aren't going to get 80%, because you need to get 80%.
Right.
So if you look at those 5 and you have 50 voters voting for 3 of them, you have 150 votes that 50 people are making, and to get in, a guy's got to get at least 40 of those votes. So do the math. If you start spreading them around, fewer guys get in. And I think the Hall of Fame I think there's been some complaints of guys who are in the Hall of Fame that, hey, it's getting too easy to get in the Hall of Fame.
That's what Deion Sanders said a few
Right. And there's been people, he's not the only one. He may be the one that voices it, but so they wanted to make it a little harder. Well, what they did doesn't work. And I think it took it doesn't get any bigger. It won't get any bigger than Bill Belichick not getting in on his first ballot.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to me, Bill Belichick will probably get in next year. To me, there's no, you don't have to apologize if you walk in the Hall of Fame and it's not your first ballot. Fran Tarkenton was a third ballot guy. Do you think Fran Tarkenton cared? Terrell Owens was a third ballot guy, and he cared so much that he ruined it for himself and his family by not going to the ceremony. Yeah. So it's a different era. I understand that, but for me, it was just adding context to how this could happen. Other than they don't like him, or he doesn't like them, and they're just idiots, and they all need to be fired.
You didn't even give me a chance to rip on you guys, but no, I just
we're all idiots, and we all need to be. Can you imagine if we'd have been fired as many the times that we've been said we should be fired? I'd be on my 500th job by now.
Did Belichick talk to Sid? Sid would have been furious if he'd not gotten in, wouldn't he?
I don't know if Belichick did enough for Sid to have Sid care.
Lord, I lost what I was going to say. Well, okay, okay. I wanted to ask you how important, and you kind of talked a little bit about it, but how important is that first ballot thing? It's a pretty rare thing to get in on your first ballot. The list is not that long, is it? Of people that get in on their first.
It's growing, and I think some of the older guys on the committee are, feel like it's growing too much, My feeling is there are certain, I'm not going to say any names or anything, but there are certain guys that end up back in the final 15 every year that we've discussed, an incredible amount of times, and they don't move on. And in the meantime, you have guys that come in who, like, I'd say, there's a lot of talk about log jams. Randy Moss didn't experience a log jam. He was just, there was a higher level of greatness that, he's a first ballot.
Yeah.
I don't think that, especially with the procedure the way it is, when Belichick is in the Hall of Fame, I don't think it's going to be, if anything, it'll be like, hey, it may take you a while, but Bill Belichick didn't get in until his second year or something,
Mm-hmm.
This is more about, I don't, there are some, maybe there's too much of the, it's the first ballot. And I don't know, maybe that you can keep the respect on the first ballot, but don't lose the respect in the process of all the guys that weren't first ballot guys that are, if you looked at a list of guys who weren't first ballot guys, you'd probably be
right. That's what I'm
as amazed as guys who were first ballot.
That's what I'm saying. I can see Bill Belichick say we're on to Cincinnati now, and he's not going to show up, and when he does get in someday. But anyway, Kevin Williams, he made a finalist this year, right?
Yeah, and I can't talk about him because we don't talk about the cut process or anything until they so
we'll save that for a future.
But yeah, that Kevin Williams, getting to the final 15 got lost a little bit in Jared's shadow, and in the irony of that is that Kevin's resume, granted Jared, the sacks are big, but Kevin's a 5-time first team All-Pro. Jared was 4. Kevin was an all-decade team. Jared didn't make an all-decade team. Kevin is one of only likely to, coming into this, he's only one of 5 guys ever to be 5-time first team All-Pro, all-decade, and not be in the Hall of Fame. Wow. So he's a guy that certainly, he needs to be in the Hall of Fame, I think.
That's a resume that presents itself. Speaking of Belichick, his former team is back in the Super Bowl. Can you believe it, Mark? Patriots in the
long-suffering Patriots fans are back in it for the first time since uh, 2019. Can you imagine waiting from waiting 7 years for a Super Bowl? I can't imagine it.
I can imagine that. In fact, I can imagine waiting a lot longer as
60.
probably.
I can imagine six. Well, mine's 60 years.
Uh,
Yours is going to be your anniversary. I'm not a big anniversary guy. Like you got to write a story when it's
Next year.
25, 30, but 50. It'll be 50 years next
Yeah,
January, I believe.
thanks for bringing that up. How do you handicap this one? What are you looking at for the Super Bowl with Sam Darnold's Seahawks and Stephon Diggs's um, New England Patriots, who's got a little troubles of his own off the field, but we won't talk about that right now.
Yeah, it's Seattle's the better team. I think Seattle. They both got really good defense. I think Seattle is just the better team overall. I think the key for New England is to pressure Sam. I think they win if they get pressure on Sam Darnold. He makes some mistakes, and I think the best way to pressure him is up the middle with that Barmore guy and that Milton Williams, who was he was part of the reason that last year we played for Philadelphia. He was one of the reasons that Patrick Mahomes didn't win a three-peat last year. Had 2 sacks up the middle. So I think that pressure up the middle would really rattle Sam. On the other side, Drake May would be the youngest guy to ever win a Super Bowl. He'd be days younger than Ben Roethlisberger when he won it in his second year. He has not had a stellar postseason, but he's had a lot of bad weather. He's been sacked 15 times, 5 in each game. Got 5 turnovers, but where he has been a thorn in everyone's side, and I think is a key to this game, is his legs and his ability to extend the plays have just killed the teams that he's faced, and that's something I think that is a key to stopping New England's offense. Is when it's third down and this guy gets out, how are you going to react? But I think it's the first Super Bowl where both teams are top 4 in offense and defense scoring. But I think a big difference, and one reason it's influencing my decision, is the experience level at the coaching staff, and Vrabel playing in 4, being a Belichick disciple, Josh McDaniels coaching in 8 of them, I believe, 8 of them, and learning at the foot of the master and having 2 weeks. That's going to be a decision, part of my decision, I guess.
Well, I mean, if the Patriots were facing and Drake May was facing a team that had let's say a Mahomes, I know he's in the AFC, but at quarterback, it would be easy to handicap this when you got the guy in his second year in a Super Bowl. The spot might be too big for him, but I don't think he can do that with these 2 quarterbacks because Sam has shown he can get rattled when he's under pressure. He's got more experience for sure. He's played the past 2 seasons. He's played very well at the position. I think there's 2 good defenses out there, and they're going to have a lot to say in how this goes if they can pressure these quarterbacks. You never know what's going to be. Over and under is at 45.5, and I think the defense are going to have a lot to say on this one. It's probably going to be an under, but I think that the Seahawks can do more offensively than the Patriots can do offensively in this one. So I'm going with the Seahawks and Sam Darnold to have the total reclamation of his career on Super Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, poor Sam. If they don't win, I mean, Sam Darnold went stride for stride with Matthew Stafford, who's going to be the MVP, I think. The Rams were his nemesis, so he beats them, and he has a great game in the NFC Championship game, and he gets here, and it's still going to be, is he can he win the Super Bowl? So I guess I'll take my doubting to the highest stage and have Sam. I'm going to have Sam embarrass me one more time, and I'm going to say that the Patriots, and I agree with you that Seattle, although New England can run the ball. They got some nice running backs, but that Kenneth Walker is a weapon. Their tight end is good. Their Jackson Smith and Jigba is phenomenal. There's a lot there to like, but I just feel like the Patriots, that experience at the coaching is gonna make a difference. And so I fully expect Sam. And if Sam wins it, and part of me is going to be rooting for Sam to just do it because of the unfair fallback. If he does have a bad game,
right,
it'll be all his fault. If they win or lose, unless it's like that Rams game he had during the season when he threw 4 picks and they lost by 2 points. I don't see Sam blowing it. I see the Patriots rising and doing what they do and winning a Super Bowl.
Well, that's great because we were tied coming into this weekend again, so now it comes down to the big game. We're taking opposite sides, so we'll see how it goes. Because I know everybody out there is really concerned about it.
And my whole explanation the whole time I'm thinking is I'm not going to win this pick because my instincts tell me that Seattle. Although almost every Super Bowl I seem to pick, except for last year, I was all in on the 3-peat, and that was like one of the worst Super Bowls ever. It was a 40-22, but it was like, wasn't it like, I mean, it was so bad that it wasn't even that close. I quit watching it. It was one of the first Super Bowl. I didn't go to them anymore. I went to like 20 some of them in a row, but I just was like, I don't need to see any more, Yeah. So I'm feeling like a lot of times whenever I go opposite of what I'm thinking, I end up getting it right. So that's definitely what I'm doing here because I feel like Seattle should win this game.
It should be a good game. I think. I think there's a lot of intrigue to it, and it'll be fun to see how it comes out. I have to figure out what I'm going to do on my annual Super Bowl bet, heads or tails on the coin flip. I haven't worked that one out yet, so I'm gonna.
So you don't have a standard tails never fails or nothing like that?
Gotta feel it in the moment, Mark.
Yeah.
As it goes in the air. Anyway, well, that should do it for this week. Thank you, Mark, for all your insight. I mean, it's great having you here because you're a Hall of Fame voter, and this Belichick thing was huge this past week, and it's
really,
it's going to continue to be. So they're out there talking about you. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, Mark. But anyway, thank you. Thanks, Mike Walden, for producing. Thanks, Joe Johnson, for putting us here. We will. We'll be back next week to talk about it some more. And thanks to all of you folks for tuning in. We appreciate it each week. So come on back. We'll talk about the Super Bowl and we'll talk about this new era of the Vikings. And, who knows if they have a GM by then or not. We'll see. But until then, enjoy the Super Bowl and skol.
Skol.